Hey guys, Jim Vanowski with Manufacturing Talks. Welcome back to the show. Another great one for you today. I've got Michelle Brydalski. So she and I worked together years ago. I've kept up with her for decades. She is an absolute guru when it comes to all things food safety, quality, regulatory. In fact, that's what she does. She's a VP at that right now, and she's doing consulting and speaking on that topic. She's here to give us the lowdown on all things food safety today here on Manufacturing Talks. She'll be here in just a minute. Stay tuned.
Welcome to Manufacturing Talks with Jim Vanowski. Industry has a million cool stories, and Jim talks to the movers and shakers who are making them happen. Let's dive in.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Manufacturing Talks. I'm Jim Vanowski, your host. Great show for you today. Got an old friend of mine, Michelle Brydalski. She is VP of Food Safety, Quality, and Regulatory at Charcuterie Artisans. Welcome, Michelle.
Hey, welcome. I'm glad to be here.
Glad to have you here. We go way back.
We do go way back. At one point, people thought we were related. That's how far back we go.
It's true. It's true. Yeah, and we'll avoid talking about a lot of that because it would bore the pants off of people.
Mhm.
But there's a lot of cool stuff too. We got to work together on a lot of neat quality and food safety kinds of things ourselves, and that's what you do. So tell us how you got doing what you're doing.
Yeah, so, most people have a plan. I did not have a plan when I got into this career. It just kind of happened, so I graduated with my BS in chemistry and was wondering what I wanted to do. Absolutely knew that I did not want to go into the chemical industry. And so just started looking for lab jobs to do work. And just happened to come upon working at General Mills. They had a third shift lab tech position open, and I decided to apply for it and got into it. Started to quickly learn that there's an actual career in food science and food safety and quality. And, I was like, hey, this is pretty cool. And, just started working up through my career at General Mills. I spent almost 18 years at General Mills in a variety of different positions at, several different companies. So I was kind of moving around every two to 3 years, and, made my way to site leader when I met you down in Georgia, working at one of those companies. And, really just loved kind of what it was about, and what I could do and kind of the influence I could have to not only protect our consumers, but our brand and our company throughout the years. So, really just embraced it. And, it just is a real passion of mine, kind of looking out for the consumers. And, I just think over the years I've learned a lot about, different ways of approaching it. And I will say this is one function where things have changed year over year. We're learning more, we're getting smarter, consumers are getting smarter, they're pushing us a little bit harder. And so that's almost that daily challenge of forcing us to have that continuous improvement mindset to make sure our programs are as robust as they can be.
Yeah, I agree completely. I mean, you think about when you and I met, what it looked like back then, and it wasn't that long ago, but it was a while back, and it's changed quite dramatically. I think the voice that quality and food safety folks have in the manufacturing operation anymore is a heck of a lot stronger, and we're all better for it.
Yeah,
that's been neat to see.
Yep, absolutely.
And yeah, like you mentioned, we met each other at General Mills. What I found cool was getting to work on stuff I grew up on. Foods I was eating as a kid.
Yeah. And I think that's when I look at my career, what really kept me in the food industry is it's real, right?
Yeah.
Like I want to work on things that I'm putting on my family's table every day, and that people I love and my friends and family are eating, and that I feel like this sense of commitment to be able to, manufacture these products in the best way possible to make sure, like I always have when the back of my head had the lens of, if I wouldn't feed it to my family, then I'm not going to let it out the door. And so I think that's kind of how a lot of people who are in food safety quality are. Their kind of approach to this is not that anybody in food manufacturing isn't thinking that, but I just think there's more of a passion and a drive, and that's what drives us to do the work we do, because it's not easy. And
No.
we tend to be the wet blanket in the plants when we're
Yeah,
making
right.
decisions to throw away product or divert product off to another stream. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
or shut things
definitely,
down.
or
Yep,
shut equipment down. It's not an easy career path, and people who stay in it for the long term, it's there's some resilience there.
for sure. But that's definitely one of the things I've seen evolve is, it used to be kind of a butting heads between
Yeah.
operations and quality, and it's not entirely gone away by any means, but it's a different picture today. Very much more
Yeah,
collaborative.
absolutely. I think there's, especially in some of the larger companies, there is definitely a sense that, we're risk assessors, right? I think
Yeah,
people, a lot of bigger companies and bigger executives are understanding that it's our job to assess risk and manage risk for the company, because if we're not doing that, it can be detrimental. The one thing
yeah,
I will say that has, like, for me personally, and it kind of as I've seen things evolve, change, is really around, the fact that we can't be black and white. We truly have to be risk assessors and,
yep,
make good risk assessments, and it can't be zero risk. It's very gray. And
right.
so we have to be good business partners as well. So when, we're making decisions, yeah, it's easy for me to say, no, get rid of it, throw it away, it's bad product. No, we have to look at it and say, okay, well, if there's this much product, how do we narrow it down based on the information we have to get down to the lowest risk possible? But it's not a zero risk
No,
approach.
never will be.
No.
What I find intriguing and a little frustrating is, I've seen the industry take on positive steps over the years and decades to really
Mhm.
drive food safety to be the priority it should. And I think the results show that, generally speaking. And yet it seems the better we do, the more bad press we get. So,
Mhm.
how would you characterize the state of affairs today around food safety and the American food supply?
Yeah, I think we're in good shape from a food industry and where we are, but we do get a bad rap. I mean, I think there's always challenges, right? I think
Yeah,
there's a couple dynamics going on. One is, our consumers are much more aware and educated on what's going on.
yeah,
And, I think some of the social media that's out there isn't always accurate.
right.
And so there's this churn of, information that's taken as gospel.
Yeah,
For example, that movie Poison, that did not
yeah,
reflect well on the food industry. And when I watched it as a food industry professional who's worked across multiple platforms and multiple companies, there was bits and pieces of it that made sense, but there was a lot of it that did not make sense. And I'm like,
yeah,
this is, staging us to be these horrible people who are, like, out there for just the money and running our hands through chests of gold, and that's our only concern in industry, which is, yeah, exactly. So
Yep.
that is not our intent, and there has been huge strides taken in the food
Yeah,
industry. But for us, there's always going to be the challenges. There's the challenge of, like, new information and new science coming down, and it's coming down at us so quickly over the last 5 to 10 years that it's hard to keep up with it, and there's not always technology or processes to be able to help us support it. So we're learning as we're trying to manage it.
yep,
Um, I think because there is so much social media presence and dynamic going on, that's also putting a ton of pressure on the regulatory agencies to
for
increase their
sure. Yep.
effectiveness, which to me then they kind of overreach and start to overreact to some
Hmm.
things, which then makes it appear as though we're worse off. For
Hmm.
example, I just read an article this morning, that there's an 8% increase in recalls just in Q1 of 2024 alone compared to the previous 5 Q1 quarters, the previous 5 years. Again, I think that's regulators reacting to information and pressure from consumers that they're not doing
Sure.
enough. And so now you start to see some of this. Not
Yeah.
saying that they're probably not warranted, not saying that they're probably bad, but I just think that there's a sensitivity. So, I think there's just so many dynamics going on right now that the food industry is constantly having to ebb and flow. There's all these state-specific food legislation and mandates coming down that, I don't think are based always on science and reality.
Yep.
And it's just a very constant change and churn is happening. But I mean, if you were to ask me, as somebody who's in this role who really has this passion to make sure we as an industry are great and that we're doing the right thing, I think we are better off. In fact, I know we are better off. It's just there's a lot more going on and a lot more pressure. And again, I don't think that the consumer education is as good as it needs to be. And quite honestly, that's where I would love to spend more time. And I have actually worked with USDA to try and help them say, how do we do more of that education where it becomes, consistent? You think about like way back, and I'm probably going to date myself. It had to be like 20 or 30 years ago when USDA did some, I don't know, consumer education around chicken and how you shouldn't overhandle chicken. And, we all became like, oh, don't touch chicken and chicken's bad. And, spray it with a little mild solution of bleach. And they did a good job because we all know chicken's bad and you shouldn't eat chicken raw, but we have never extended that beyond all other categories. And I think there's an opportunity to do that.
Yeah, and it is a bit of a tightrope because same thing when it comes to just the levels of science. We're measuring things in parts per trillion now.
Exactly.
People have no concept of, if it's 10 parts per trillion, it's probably not going to hurt you.
Yeah, exactly.
But oh my God!
But they think it is, they think it is, and
there's
that's what we're
something harmful in your
to
food. It's in there. Yeah. Oh my gosh!
And it's all aseptic, right? Remember, all food's aseptic, and it's interesting because even when I have those conversations with friends and family, it drives me crazy when I'll see a comment on Facebook or Instagram, and someone's like, "Oh, did you know that my baby carrots have chlorine dioxide on them, and they're trying to poison us?" And I'm like, "Stop, please stop. Food is not sterile. Oh, by the way, those baby carrots were in soil where the deer and every other animal out there was pooping on them. And it probably has salmonella. So let's not be surprised by that."
Yeah. Similarly, they talk about the horrible labels and, oh, look at all these chemicals. Well, yeah, if you made stuff at home and listed the chemical names of everything you put in it, that's what the label would look like.
Yeah,
whether it's cooked at home or in the plant.
Exactly.
Yeah. That being said, sometimes we create bad news for ourselves. And I think, here lately, you've seen a lot of things around foreign material and getting recalls for stuff that really shouldn't be in the food, being there and being potentially hazardous. What's going on with all that?
Yeah, that is the one thing that I don't normally trend and track every single recall coming through, but I will say this year alone, I was seeing the recalls for foreign material coming through much more frequently than I had in the past. Specifically, this year alone, we've seen 16 recalls related to foreign materials, between glass, plastic, wood, metal, bone. That honestly is a little bit alarming to me.
Yeah.
Sadly, I'll say it's probably not as surprising to me as it should be. In my past life, I worked in a role where I actually oversaw 125 contract manufacturers globally. And, when I go in those facilities and you see some of the programs and the way that some smaller companies, not the big companies actually have this under control and have had this under control for a long time. Now, granted, do things happen? Yes. But, the way they're approaching their HACCP programs and their assessment programs and, just even their GFSI certifications that they have, it's very checkbox. It's still very checkbox in many instances. And so when I see things happening, that's the first thing that comes to my mind is, how is their HACCP plan not addressing this? If you had a robust HACCP plan and you were not just using it as a document that you had to create because somebody told you so, and we're actually following the principles and the processes to kind of build that program, you would see throughout your process where all your risk points are, which is what it should do, is identify where those risk points are. And then you'd put in appropriate either control points or critical control points or other, upstream mechanisms to be able to control that. I will say in my past life.
Let's pause there and define for people HACCP.
So the HACCP, what HACCP actually stands for?
Yeah.
So HACCP,
we have a general audience here. They don't know what we're talking about.
Okay, that's true. That is true. So HACCP is your mandated food safety plan. HACCP stands for hazard analysis and your critical control point. And so what that process requires you to do is basically look at your process from the start of your process through to your finished product. You create a flow diagram of your whole process. And as you're going through each one of those steps that you've identified, you're looking at that step and saying, okay, is there any potential biological, chemical, or physical risk that could happen at that one particular point? And so if a company is doing that process well, you will look at each one of those steps. For example, if I'm at a step where there's grinding going on, like right now, we grind our meat. Grinders are notorious for having metal to metal wear. And so that is a risk that should be identified on your plan, where you could say, okay, it's probably not going to happen if you have a robust preventative maintenance program, but there is an opportunity that metal to metal wear could happen and it could generate metal foreign material. And so, if you're taking those steps, you're going to look at your process. And the nice thing about, or to me, the beauty of doing your flow diagram and sitting down and actually looking at it is saying, all right, so if I have metal at this point, or if I have, with your incoming raw materials, if I have metal coming in from a supplier, how am I going to be able to identify it upstream versus all the way at the end of my process? Yep. And so what I see is that a lot of companies that I've worked with or that I've seen their programs is they will identify lots of different risks, but will do nothing to kind of address them upstream to be able to either manage or control them up risk so that they're managing it before it gets to the end. Most companies are relying on their critical control point, which is typically a metal detector or an X-ray unit at the very end of the process, to tell them when they have a problem. You should be identifying some control points upstream that not only help you identify you have a problem sooner than you do upstream, so it never gets to the critical control point, or you can use that information then too to help you kind of narrow down sections of where could this be coming from. Now, is it coming from your supplier? Well, if you're sifting or metal detecting or you have magnets in place while you're dumping the ingredients in there, if you had something in that raw material, you're going to see it right then and there, and now you can go work with your supplier. But again, if you wait till the very end, if you wait till the very end, now you're in trouble because you can't. Did it come from a supplier? Was it a piece of equipment? If it was a piece of equipment, which piece of equipment? So now you're having to investigate your whole system. And so, what I'm seeing is that, there's a lot of companies who are just saying, okay, you want me to have a HACCP plan? Here, I've got a HACCP plan, but they're not using it the way they need to. Yeah. Or they're saying, well, GFSI, which is Global Food Safety Initiative, it's a certification that most companies have because their customers require it, or their customers require it. They're just saying, well, I'm doing it because I SQF requires it or BRC requires it. And when you take that approach, this is when situations happen, and then they're all surprised when they have this major incident of something that happens. Yeah.
So I'm glad we walked through that, because to people who aren't familiar with what goes on in a food plant, you just kind of lined out the extreme focus that people who are doing it right do, and that's looking at every single step within the manufacturing process, identifying the hazards that could be coming from that, and then putting plans in place to make sure that you're ensuring that those hazards never reach your consumer. And like you said, the well-established and primarily bigger companies, you can almost assume are going to have those practices and procedures running well.
Yeah.
Not to disparage smaller companies and startups. They're the ones who are innovating. They're bringing us the
Yes.
new stuff and the cool stuff, but
Yep.
they're the ones also who, tend to be, like you said, kind of just checking the box and not really using the processes for what they're intended for.
Yeah, and I would also say twofold. One is you're absolutely right that larger, more well-established companies. It's not that they probably are doing it; they are doing it.
Yep.
They've been doing it and doing it well for a long time.
Right.
Interesting on the flip side, most consumers are like anti-big establishment, right? And
Yep.
so, from a safety perspective, you're much better off. Your likelihood of having issues on a much more established company are probably a lot lower. So when you want to do your own risk assessment, that's honestly where I would go, but that's not the way, that's not the information you hear. And but on the flip side,
and one point there that kind of flies in the face of what people see in the media is, if a big company does have something get out, it's going to be all over the place and it's going to be huge news. Where if a small company, regional, local, has something happen, you probably won't hear about it.
Yeah. And on the flip side of that, I don't think that I think it's prudent to say that smaller companies or startup companies may not have these things in place because they're choosing to do that. I think it's a lack of knowledge. There's a lack of know-how. And this is why, a lot of times when people ask me, well, what should I be doing? I'm like, you need to find a good system expert or somebody.
They should be hiring you.
They should be hiring me. Exactly. Because you need to have somebody who's going to tell you the facts and help you identify where the gaps are. And then, as a company, you can decide how you want to manage it. But it's most what I've tended to see is that it's their lack of know-how of regulations, again, because the regulations are changing so often.
Right. Yeah. And it can be someone who's very well versed in creating good food. It can be someone from a chef background. All that. It's a different world in the process side of things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I see this in my current role. I mean, we acquired a smaller company and they did this craft small batch, meat and processes, and it was awesome, but there was just a little bit of, at times, lack of know-how with, the risks that they were assuming on how they were manufacturing some of their products because they just didn't know,
Yep. So great advice. I mean, that's a great point. If anyone out there is looking to get started in the food world, definitely go get someone like Michelle. And I'm going to personally recommend just call Michelle. Because it truly is. It's got to be someone who knows that process side of things and how to keep consumers safe at scale.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so you mentioned a few things that are out there, have been out there for a while: metal detectors and x-rays and magnets, things where you can either screen out bad stuff or identify it while it's moving through the system and therefore remove it. And we've been using those things for decades. Is there new stuff out there? Have they improved? What's the state of technology when it comes to food safety and being able to see what's going through and make sure it never gets out of your plant?
Yeah, it's been interesting because there's been a ton of push to explore a lot of different new tools and mechanisms and
AI, right?
Exactly. I mean, there's a ton out there.
Yep.
I'll be honest, personally, because I'm all about evaluating new technology and evaluating different things. In fact, I'm working with a company right now they have a hyperspectral imaging equipment that they're trying to sell me, of course. But I'm working with them because I'm entertaining it, right? I never know what I don't know until I try it. So we're actually working with them to kind of use that equipment or see if the equipment is capable of identifying not only foreign material in your product, but also, this is where I'm more excited about if it works, is possibly surface bacteria.
Oh, wow.
So, I think as I was talking with them, I'm like, okay, if you could do this and figure out a way to identify even surface bacteria, that could be huge. So
No
I'm actually
doubt.
working with them now, but I don't know that it's where it needs to be today, but at least if we can work with these companies to start to try to help them identify where it could be beneficial to us,
Yeah. Yep. And
I
how to
think it
scale
would
it up.
be exactly. I think it would be awesome.
Yep.
I'll be honest though, today compared to 20 years ago, I still believe that the tried and true methods of identifying foreign material is still your metal detectors, your X-ray devices,
Yep.
using screens, sieves, vision systems. Those have been around a long time. They still do what we need them to do today.
Yeah.
They still work,
Yep.
if you're using them and using them right. But I honestly haven't seen a ton of new innovation that is mass scaled up at this point.
Yep.
So to me, the tried and true is really kind of what I would suggest sticking with. And again, I think the more important discussion is when you're talking about foreign material detection is how do you use those different types of devices throughout your process and not just at the end of your process.
Yep. What about, similar discussion on the foodborne illness front? So bacteria and viruses in food. Is there anything new in that world?
Detection wise,
Yeah.
no. I think I think the whole genome sequencing is starting to increase, which I do like that idea. I mean,
Yeah, for sure.
we have used some of that technology in our own facility here to kind of identify trends and see if there's those family or niche bacteria that are hanging around, and not only
Mhm.
hanging around now, but in one instance we were doing some testing and we found a strain that had been in our facility for over 10 years. It had been identified 10 years prior, and it was
Wow.
still kind of there. Now we've been able to mitigate it and we're in a really good spot, but I think the data, although can be alarming when you start to hear about that, because you're like, holy crap, this thing's been staying around for 10 years. That's a little nerve wracking, but on the other hand, it's data and power that helps us, kind of drive the programs that we need to drive and get the
Yeah.
resources that we need to get to mitigate it.
Yeah. Well, and the reality, it's another thing people need to know is
Yeah.
these bacteria, they're omnipresent. It's not like you're
Yeah.
ever going to rid a factory of
Yeah.
every possible food source of food contamination when it comes to that stuff, but controlling it and keeping it
Yeah.
away from your food is what it's all about.
And I think, that is an excellent point. And I mean, when I think about, consumer awareness,
Hmm.
and even not even consumer awareness, even within facilities that I work,
Yeah.
this thought that, like, oh, well, I've done sanitation and I've, put down all these different sanitizers and I've
Hmm.
used all these different systems and I'm good to go. And
Yep.
I keep having to remind people, every day is a new point in time. Every time you have that clean break at sanitation, yes, your facility might be completely clean, but that's a point in time. And as soon as
Yeah.
people start walking into your facility and there's vectors, right? There's
Yep.
listeria in the environment and,
Yep.
all the time. So every day is a new day. And I think that's surprising to a lot of people. And so, managing to, an event or managing to one day, sanitation is not really the best approach. And personally, I think that's why we continue to see recalls over, foodborne related illness and pathogen
Yeah.
related illnesses increase. I mean,
Yep.
last year alone, we had almost 120-ish foodborne illness recalls, and it's not trending down. It's actually trending. It has been trending a little bit down, but it's kind of this, it goes down for a little bit and now we're seeing it starting to
Breaking
increase.
back. Yep. Well, what I find kind of amusing and also frustrating is we get all this stuff about, oh, processed food is bad.
Yeah,
And guess what, people? Some of those processes are what kills the bacteria and keeps your food safe.
exactly.
Processed
Exactly.
food is not necessarily bad. No.
Yeah. You're cooking a food and it's giving off something because of the cooking process. Well, there's the risk of not cooking it, which is probably a lot higher and a lot more detrimental to people than, some of the limited amounts of, chemicals that might be, implemented when you're cooking something. Yeah, I agree with that 100%.
Yep. Now, one thing we've talked about on this show quite a bit in the more general production world is the effect of losing our skilled people. You know, the baby boomers are retiring and they're the ones who've been running things for decades, and now they're going out the door and we got all these newbies coming in. Are you seeing that effect in the food safety front as well?
Yes, I definitely would see, you know, the the more passionate people who want to do the job that we do, because again, working in food safety and quality is not an easy job. It is
Right.
not a 9 to 5 job. It is a
Right.
24/7, 365 job.
Yep.
You're getting calls in the middle of the night. You're working long hours. You know, I personally was involved in a recall last year, and when do recalls happen? At 5 p.m. on Friday afternoon. In
Yeah.
fact, hopefully we
Christmas
will not be
Day.
running into one. Christmas Day, Thanksgiving week, you know, you're on vacation. That's when
Yep.
recalls
Yep.
happen. And what
Right.
happens? You need to go into the plant and you need to work with the team and engage your recall team and get things going. So,
Yep.
you know, I will say that what we're having to do, and you know, like one of the things that I'm really passionate about is developing that next generation, and
Yep.
also kind of being realistic with how they want to work and figuring out how to balance that, right? Because back in the day when I was, you know, I would say a baby quality engineer, when I started off my career and I was a baby QE, you know, I'm like, you wanted me to work 20-hour days, I was working 20-hour days.
Yeah.
Now, that's not realistic. You know, they don't want to do that. So we have
Nope.
to figure this out. And so how do you balance a team of people who can support? And, you know, for me, really the way I've been driving that within my own function and my teams is, you know, doing as much cross training as possible. And,
Right.
you know, on days and weeks where you don't have to do it, you kind of balance schedules. And but you have to get creative. And if you're going to continue to do things the way we've always done it in the last 10 or 15 years, people are going to struggle to get the right talent, because
Yep.
the other thing that I'm seeing a trend on is, you know, if you don't have the right culture, and I'm not just talking about quality or food safety culture, I'm talking about team culture and
Yeah.
plant
Yeah.
culture and company culture,
Yep.
you know, someone may work for you for a year and then they're moving on because,
Yeah.
you know, and it's not always about the money. Like, it's not, hey, I'm going because I'm getting more money. It's because,
Yep.
hey, I want to go work over here because they do, you know, fun things on Wednesday, and every, you know, Thursday they go and do this, or, you
Yep.
know, it's the culture. So,
Well,
you know,
and as the baby boomers go, they have more opportunities. You know,
yeah,
you're fighting against
absolutely.
a tougher job market.
Exactly. So yeah, it's just as much of an issue in food safety and quality as it is in any function.
Yeah. Figured. Okay.
Yeah.
Anything we haven't touched on that we should know when it comes to this world?
I would just say, you know, as an industry, we're doing our best, right? We are doing the right things. We're not
Yep.
doing things intentionally. And I just think it's important for people to understand that there is a lot of work that goes into making safe, quality foods.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, and I liked what you said at the start. Most of us truly are in the back of our minds constantly saying, "Am I okay with my kids eating this?"
Yes, absolutely.
Yep.
Yep,
So well said.
absolutely.
What's next for you? What's on the career horizon?
So, you know, I'm doing my VP thing now, which has been
Yep.
really excited. And, you know, I'm always looking for opportunities to continue to learn new platforms and grow. But, you know, on top of this, I'm looking to, you know, I've been dabbling a little bit in, you know, doing some trainings with people and working with different organizations and doing a little consulting on the side. Because again, you know, I feel like if my passion is to be able to make safe products across the industry, I can get a broader span in helping some of these companies that really need the help. You know,
Yeah.
I've worked for a lot of stable, larger companies, and that's awesome. And I've
Yep.
learned a lot throughout
Yep.
my career, and I want to be able to spread my knowledge and figure out how I can do that across these other companies. Because the one thing I will say is that a lot of these smaller companies and startups, they're making amazing products. They're
Yeah,
super
exactly.
agile. They're making amazing products.
Yep.
And I just want to figure out how I can support them to ensure that they're making safe products and also high quality products, so that they can grow.
Yeah. Well, and I was not kidding. I would recommend you absolutely in that regard because I know what you've done in your career and you have worked in places where this was done right. You know the ins and outs of how it's done right and how to make it work at any size company. So
Yeah.
if you're looking for help, folks, give Michelle a call.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. This has been extremely educational.
Yeah, this was awesome.
Yeah, and it is interesting because you and I've been in the food world for decades, and it's like we've forgotten more than a lot of people are ever going to know about this stuff.
Exactly.
But it really is important that people understand how much goes into this and how much is being done to keep the food that they buy in their grocery store safe and
Yes.
nutritional, and be confident you can give it to your kids and they're going to be just fine.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yep, good deal. Thank you, Michelle.
All right. Take care.
Yep. And of course, thanks as always to you guys in the audience. That's why we're here. I hope you found this one as educational as I did. I can't promise everyone's going to be as educational as Michelle was, but everyone I bring on is at least a little educational. We're here every Tuesday. Come back and join us. If you have any questions for Michelle, put them in the comments. We'll try to get you answers, and join us again. We'll see you for Manufacturing Talks. I'm Jim Vinofsky. So long.
Thanks for tuning in to Manufacturing Talks with Jim Vinofsky. Watch for new episodes dropping every Tuesday. And don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe.